Hello friends, Pony Plays Card Games here, and today we are going to be doing a beginner's guide to the rules of play. So the English cards are out for the My Little Pony card game, which is incredibly exciting. We actually just had set 2 drop recently, and we've also received full English rules PDFs of the more in-depth rules of the game, which showed that the mats that come with the decks are missing on a few points that I think are kind of important for playing the game and also give added clarity to other aspects. So while a lot of this you'll find on there, I'm going to be going over the rules in a beginner-friendly way, adding the few that I think are missing, and hopefully helping you to learn how to play this game. So we're going to get right into it. And I'll also be leaving in the description of this video a link to where you can find the full rules PDF in case you want to check it out yourself and really get into the nitty-gritty of it. So let's start with the cards with which you play the game. And the first card, which will probably be the first card you see when you open your brand new deck, is the main character card type. So main character cards are lovely in design. They've got this full art spread, generally a close-up of the character as the back of the card, although sometimes different if you get an alt art. But in terms of gameplay mechanic, they're quite simple and can actually be replaced with anything that both players agree will be representing your main character, which could be a toy, a token, or any other collectible card that you would like to use. So they generally have got a name as well as additions and card identifier numbers down the bottom, but none of that has, as of thus far, been really relevant in terms of gameplay. They're just a lovely tracker piece for the game. But what does come up in gameplay quite frequently are character cards. Not to be confused with main character cards, these character cards are different. They have a lot of impact on the game. They're probably the most common card type that you're going to use or play. They have got a main deck card back, so they can be shuffled in with all of the other types of cards that will go in with your main deck. They have got this little horseshoe symbol up in the top corner here, which represents that they are a character card. They have a cost of Force of Harmony, which is the full official name for their cost, up in the top left-hand corner here in that crystal shape. They have an inspiration value in the bottom right-hand corner there, which is the value they use to perform contact to show how good they are at solving problems, and it's generally the combat statistic of any other game. They have their card name, so this is Spike. Their card types, this is a Dragon Spike card. The name and card type are frequently repeated along the card, so each card seems to have the same type as they do name. Then they have got any abilities that they might have, a rarity symbol down here. So this brown crystal represents an uncommon card. Main character cards, I will note, although it's difficult to see here, have a little ruby red diamond shape down the bottom, which shows that they are a ruby rare card. And the character cards, as with every other card in this game, have a card ID down here. So this is SD01A, uncommon, or U03. So the third uncommon from starter deck 1A. Card ID is actually very important within this game because when building your deck, you're only allowed to have 4 copies of any card, not by name, but by card ID. So this is important because there are more than one kind of spike, for example. These 3 spikes are all quite different. This is a 4-cost 6 inspiration, a 3-cost 4 inspiration with an ability, and a 1-cost 2 inspiration. But they all have unique card IDs. This one is common number 3, uncommon number 3, common number 4 from SD01A. So that allows you to play up to 4 copies of any of these cards because they are actually different cards, even though they're all Spike. And that is where the card ID in the bottom corner of the cards is important across all of these cards. So that is your character card as opposed to your main character card. Then we have got event cards. Event cards are like one-use spells or actions. They have a cost of Force of Harmony in the top corner. They have their card type symbol up in the top right-hand corner, which is this paper and note symbol. They have a name, an ability, the rarity symbol, which for them is Sapphire Rare, which they share with item cards. All events and items printed thus far have been Sapphire Rares, whereas character cards have a variety of different rarities that they can come in. And they have their card ID in the bottom corner there, which is helping you to identify between different cards of the same name. Then we have got item cards, marked with the treasure chest symbol for their card type. They have their cost as well in the top corner, a name, an ability, the rarity symbol, and the card ID number. Item cards are adorned to characters, so handed to them for the character to hold. Some item cards can only be adorned to specific characters, so only that character is allowed to hold it. Characters are only allowed to hold one item card at a time, which is something that I found lacking in the rules from the base sheet and was elaborated on in the full PDF. But you are allowed to replace what item a character is holding by sending the one that they're currently holding to the retirement area when you play a new one onto them. So that's a very important note, I believe, because if you're playing a deck that loves playing item cards, then you're going to need to know that you can't stack more than one onto any given character. And now we have scene cards. Scene cards are a little bit different to these other cards we've gone over because they have a different card back and are actually intended for a completely different deck. When building a deck in the My Little Pony card game, you need one main character card, a 50-card deck comprised of characters, events, and item cards, 4 story cards, stages 1 to 4, which we'll get to in a moment, and a 15-card scene deck, which can only be comprised of scene cards. And that is why their backs are different from the main deck card backs, because they're actually made to go into a completely different small deck that goes off to the side. Scene decks are what produce your resources to play the game with. They are tapped to pay the cost of Force of Harmony. So tapping, for anyone unfamiliar with the term, is turning a card horizontal to show that it has been used for the turn. And at the start of each of your turn, you get to untap the cards you have in play, which is turn them vertical and make them ready for use again. Now, the scene cards are made up of their name, their card type symbol, which is this little signpost, their ability, which you can see printed there, Inspo Boost. Your Twilight Sparkle gets +1 inspiration until end of this contact. There's this little everyday mark, which I'll cover in a second. Their rarity, which is Emerald Rare. Now, every scene card printed thus far has been an Emerald Rare. And their card ID number down in the bottom corner there. Now, every day is actually a really important little thing to note, because as I had said before, you are only allowed to run 4 copies of any card based on their card ID in your deck. This also applies to your scene deck unless the card says every day. Every day makes it a basic card which you are allowed to run any number of copies of in your deck. So like a basic energy from Pokemon or a basic land in Magic the Gathering, you can have your entire 15 card scene deck made up fully of Golden Oak Library. even though every card has the same card ID. You're not limited to 4 if the card has every day. Then we have the last card type, which is story cards. Story cards, you need to have a full set of 4, which need to be stages 1 to 4, and they all have to have the same primary title. So this story set's primary title is Searching for Elements of Harmony. Every single one of these story cards, stages 1 through 4, has that primary title, even if their secondary title, such as Consulting the Guide or Through the Everfree Forest, may be different. So they have their primary title and secondary title, their rarity, their stage count, any abilities, and their card ID number down in the bottom corner there. And for the backs of these ones is really cute touch. They have got what's going on in the story at that time. So that's just a sweet added bonus, is that you can actually read through the story as you go if you would like to. And that is the full run of the different card types that you will find in the game of My Little Pony. And now we're going to move on to the setup for the game. So setting up, actually one thing I will cover first to do with the card ID number, because it is important to know when it comes to building your deck. Here we go, here's a good example card. So you see this card here, the event Time for Cleanup. Its card ID number is BP01SPR02, but you can get alt arts. This game has some wonderful alt art cards in it, and alt art cards have this little symbol there prior to the card ID number. So that's what is often termed as the shining symbol. So this is shining BP01SPR02. When it comes to how many copies of a card you can play in your deck, that little symbol does not mean you can play up to 4 of this and up to 4 of this as separate cards. It is ignored when it comes to the card ID. It is simply to let you know that this is an alt art. So just wanted to cover that before moving on, actually. Let's zoom out so we can see the field a bit better. Here we go. So, to set up for a game of My Little Pony, you take your 4 matching story stages of stage 1 to 4, and you place them in your story area, smallest to the left, largest to the right. And then you take your main character card and you put it next to your stage 1, or you can place it there to start with. And that is your story stage as a main character setup. You shuffle your 15 card scene deck and you set it off to the side, face down. And you shuffle your 50 card main deck and you set that off to the side, face down as well. Then each player will draw a hand of 5 cards. After determining who goes first, you'll draw a hand of 5 cards actually. So normally you would roll a dice or play rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first, and then you see your hand. A little note, that is a little note, and it's a bit of a stickler for details, but it can change your decision of if you'd like to go first or second once you've seen what you're going to draw. So determine who goes first and draw your hand of 5. Now, if you are, for any reason, unhappy with this hand of 5 cards, you are allowed a mulligan. What a mulligan is, it's a redo of your hand. You take these 5 cards in any order that you should like to have them, and you place them on the bottom of your deck. And then, without shuffling, you draw 5 new cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this will become your hand for the game. Each player gets 1 mulligan if they want it, and that is it. And from there, you will place the top 4 cards of your deck without looking at them on top of your story stages. These are your plan cards. Plan cards will help to protect you from losing the game. And the last thing you do is you put out a scene card. The person who is going first places their first scene card face down, where the person who is going second has their first scene card come turned up. Turned up is the official correct terminology. Turned down is the face down, turned up is the face up. So if we were, for example, going second, ours would be turned up, and our opponent, which I'll just run over and do, would have one face down. There we go. So that is setup for the game of My Little Pony. I already had most of it done for the other side's play field, and then we can go into gameplay as well as some of the card abilities that you're going to face when actually playing the game. So I think I might move to abilities now just to have them covered. Let's see, what good abilities do we have in this game? We have got the Farewell ability. Farewell, as you can see denoted there. Now these are the trigger conditions for the ability. You have got Farewell abilities, Appear abilities, Pre-plan abilities, and each are in a nice little color-coded box. There are Adventure area abilities, which will either say just Adventure or something like Adventure Tap, if there's a condition to activating them. And I do believe, aside from the scene cards Inspo Boost, that is about it for what we have in the game at the moment. But they have added more as they go along, so we know that a few more are coming, and I will cover what those are when they're released into English. So let's start with that Farewell ability. What a Farewell ability is an ability that is triggered when the character card leaves the adventure area. The adventure area is one of these 3 spots on both players' field, and that is where character cards are played. Most of the action of the game happens in the adventure area. You then have behind it your story area, and then down the bottom is your scene card area. When a character is in the adventure area and it contacts and is knocked out by contact, that is the most common way it can leave play, but maybe an ability returns it to your hand as well, or some other form of removal has it leave play. Its Farewell ability will trigger. You do what the Farewell ability says for you to do, and that is it. Nice and simple. And Appear abilities are similarly simple. An Appear ability is like the opposite of a Farewell ability. This ability occurs when the character enters the adventure area. Normally, that's going to happen when you pay its cost and play it from the hand. But other abilities can put characters into the adventure area by other ways, such as from your retirement area and putting them directly into play. And that will still trigger their Appear ability, which will then do what it says, so long as the card is able. And if it can't complete its full ability, you complete the ability as best you can, so doing as much as possible, and that is where it's going to have to end for the ability. So if you can't completely perform an ability, such as an ability that requires you to select 2 cards, if there's only 1 card to be selected, you're only going to be allowed to select 1 card. That can probably be the most impactful for pre-plan abilities. Pre-plan abilities are booby trap style effects. They are triggered when a card in your plan cards is removed in some way, which is generally done by characters getting a direct hit. The card is removed, revealed, and if it has a pre-plan ability, that pre-plan ability will trigger. It will do what it says, and it will be moved to the retirement area. If the card does not have a pre-plan ability, it will instead be moved to your hand. The reason why it is impactful for pre-plans if they don't have a valid target, such as Trixie's ability, choose one character with cost of Force of Harmony 3 or less in the rival's adventure area to retire. So let's say they had out this Spike, whose cost of Force of Harmony is 3 or less. You could use her to cause this Spike to retire, sending it to their retirement area. But what if instead they had this Big Mac, whose cost of Force of Harmony is 4? Well, she wouldn't be allowed to target it. So she would do as much as she could, which was in that case nothing, and move to the retirement area. It would be a bit of a waste of the ability. But you have to do as much as you can, and that is the end result. Then there are adventure area abilities. So adventure in the black box means that this ability is valid to be used while the card is in the adventure area. So as opposed to when it enters or when it leaves, this is just going to be on while it's there. This Pinkie Pie says that while there is any character adorned with an item in your adventure area, this character gets +2 inspiration. So that means no matter whose turn it is, you're going to be able to have this Pinkie Pie be 2 points stronger so long as one of your characters is adorned with an item. And then, as another point to adventure area abilities, this one is an adventure tap ability. The reason that this is different is the cost. So this adventure ability has to be activated by paying a cost, which in this case is tapping the card, turning it horizontal, as we had mentioned earlier. So the reason that it's majorly different is that you're only allowed to choose to activate adventure abilities during your main phase, whereas this adventure ability on Pinkie Pie is constantly active, one that requires you to take an action to use it, like tapping the character, is only going to be usable during your own main phase. Now, characters untap at the start of your turn just like scene cards, so it's kind of a once per turn ability, unless you had some effect that could untap your characters. And then the last ability type that we're going to go into now is the Inspo Boost ability. Inspo Boosts are a kind of ability that is used by turning down your scene cards, flipping them over during the contact step. It's one of the few abilities that you can choose to activate. Actually, I think it is currently the only ability that you can choose to activate outside of your own main phase, because you're allowed to use it during the contact step. And for what cards we have available to us at the moment, it gives one of your specific type of characters inspiration during that specific contact. We'll get more into what that is and why it's important in a moment when we cover contacts, but basically for now, it's good enough to know that it will boost their combat ability by 1 point for each of these that you flip over, just for that little interaction. And now we are going to look at turn sequence and winning the game. So it's important before you really get into learning about playing the game to understand what you're even trying to do in the game. How do you win? Winning the game is done in one of two ways. The main way that you're generally going to win the game is to promote your main character through all 4 of your story stages to get to the final story stage, which has the ability, when promoted to this stage, you win the game. although technically it's a game rule that says you win the game instead of an ability. So there's no card that can cancel an ability and say that you do not win the game, just to be clear. So promoting your main character all the way through your story stages to stage 4 is the general way that you'll win the game. But there is one other option. If a player would try to draw a card, but their main deck has no cards for them to draw from, for example, you have used them all this game, that is an incredibly long game, but it can happen. If you would try to draw a card and your main deck doesn't have any cards, you instead lose the game. This is not the same for your scene deck. You can have all of your scene cards in play, you can have been playing for that long, and you can still continue the game even if you would need to try and put a scene into play, which is termed as adding a scene, just so that you are aware, because sometimes there will be cards with the ability, such as this story stage from the last roundup, when promoted to this stage, add one scene. So what this is saying is to add the top card of your deck to your scene area, turned up and ready for use. That is what every card that says add a scene will be meaning, is adding the top card of your scene deck to your scene area. So now that we know how to win the game, we can work out how to go about getting there. And that will need you to play turns. So the general turn structure, which is actually covered by a little reminder bar down the bottom of the mats, but if you don't have a mat, don't worry, it's a very simple process. You start by untapping any tapped cards you have in play. So if any of your character cards, your scene cards, anything like that is tapped, you untap them, turn them horizontal again. You then draw one card from your main deck and add it to your hand. You don't do that if you're the first turn player in the game and this is your very first turn. They skip drawing their first card. But the person going second, which for this example, Twilight was going second, they get to draw and everyone from there on gets to draw. It's just that first turn player's very first turn, they skip their first draw. After you have drawn your card, you then get to add a new scene to your scene area, face up and ready for use for that turn, and then you get to go into playing. You enter your main phase, which is a phase where you can do a lot of things as much as you would like to. So the things that you can do in your main phase are, actually I should leave that there because it's a good card to have for this example. The things you can do are play cards by tapping scenes equal to their cost of Force of Harmony and doing what you're supposed to do with them. For a character card, you play it by paying its cost and putting it into an empty spot in your adventure area. It can be any spot in your adventure area. It doesn't have to be the first or the last spot. Anywhere you want to is fine. And you cannot put it into a spot that already has a character. Unlike with item cards, character cards cannot be replaced. So if you already have some weaker characters in play that you would prefer to replace with a stronger character, you're not allowed to just bump that one off. You have to wait until it is removed by some other method, generally in contact. You could also play an event card. Event cards are played by paying their cost of Force of Harmony, tapping the scene cards that are equal to the value in the top left corner, doing what they say to do, or as much of it as you can, and placing them into your retirement area. Now, certain event cards have a restriction on them, such as only use when there is any Pinkie Pie in your adventure area. The general logic of doing as much as you can on a card's ability is ignored if they have a play restriction. You simply can't play them at all. So for this one, which lets you choose a Twilight Sparkle in your adventure area and give it +2 inspiration until end of turn, you can still play this card and do as much of it as you can, even if you don't have a Twilight in play. So it'll basically just be useless and go to your retirement area. If you don't have a Pinkie Pie in play, you're not allowed to use this card at all, which means you can't pay the cost to play it, or even attempt to do what it's saying to do. This card is locked from being played. Then you have got item cards. Item cards can have a restriction, such as only adorn Twilight Sparkle, which, again, if you don't have the character in play, you're then not allowed to play that card. But other item cards are not nearly as restrictive. This card here, for example, Guiding Tone, can only be adorned to a Twilight Sparkle. So you pay 2 and select a Twilight Sparkle in play, and you put this item onto that character to adorn it. And then, while this item is on that character, you'll gain the benefits listed on the item, such as characters next to the adorned character get +1 inspiration. So for this example, this Rarity, who is next to my Twilight, would be getting +1 inspiration. And as I had mentioned earlier, if you want to play a new item onto a character who has one, you have to swap out the item, placing the old one into the retirement area to give the character a new item card. So just to repeat, because it's not listed on the base sheets, character cards cannot be replaced, item cards can be replaced, and you can only have one item per character. But you can have one item on all 3 of your characters. So that is playing of cards. That's how you play the various cards. You pay the costs, you meet any conditions that need to be met, and you either adorn, do what they say and send to retirement area, or put them into an empty adventure area slot. The last thing that you can do during your main phase is activate abilities of cards in your adventure area. You can do this before playing cards. You can do any of these actions in any order and as much as you would like to, / can actually physically pay for. Activating an ability in your adventure area is abilities such as Adventure Tap. So this is an adventure area ability that you choose to activate by tapping the character as opposed to one that is constantly active. So for this Rarity, I would have her in my adventure area, tap her, and be able to give a Rarity +2 inspiration until end of turn, which I would choose her as she is my only Rarity in play, and increase her inspiration until my turn comes to an end. And that is everything that you can do in your main phase, and we would then move to the contact phase, which I will just quickly set up a bit of an example here and be right back. Pause the video. Okay, so I have got a setup here, and I'm going to just change camera angles so we can have a nice top-down view. And remembering that we put Rarity as the first turn player in our example. Okay, so here is a top-down view. Zooming in doesn't help too much. Here's the top-down view of our field of play at the moment, with Rarity as the player who went first, and Twilight Sparkle as the player who went second, and it is currently Twilight Sparkle's turn. And we are moving on to the contact phase. So within the contact phase, your characters interact with the opponent's characters or can score direct hits, which will help you to progress towards winning the game. And there are several kinds of interactions that can occur during the contact phase. And you handle those interactions one at a time based on the lines, which is your opponents and your adventure area slots running one at a time from left to right of the first turn player. So seeing as Rarity went first, from her left through to her rightmost, which for the second turn player will be rightmost to leftmost, and is carried out in that order for the entirety of the game. So, starting on the leftmost of the first turn player, we go to contact, and one of three possible situations can occur. Either there can be a character in both players' spaces of that line, there can be a character only in the turn player's space in that line, or there can be no character in the turn player's space of that line. And each of these are handled differently. So if there is, we'll start with the easiest, no character in the turn player's space on that line. If there are no characters on the turn player's space on that line, then you ignore that, even if there's a character on the opponent's space in that line, and you move on to the next contact. Because it's your turn and you have nothing to do there, you just ignore it and move on, regardless of whether there's someone to defend or not. If there is a character on your space and your opponent's space, you contact and interact with those characters. So here we have got, for example, this 6 inspiration Spike and 6 inspiration Rarity. Now these two characters are going to contact. When characters contact, starting with the player whose turn it is, you get to choose whether or not you would like to activate any Inspire abilities. So Inspire abilities are the abilities that we had on our scene cards. There we go. Which for the Golden Oaks Library says, Inspo Boost, your Twilight Sparkle gets +1 inspiration until the end of this contact. Now, in this example, we have Spike. Spike cannot be inspired by the Golden Oaks Library, and so we would have to choose not to inspire, which means his inspiration would be set at 6. Now, seeing as we've chosen whether or not to inspire, and I'll do a different example with Twilight in just a second, but seeing as we've chosen whether or not to inspire, it is now the defending player's turn to choose whether or not they would like to inspire. Rarity would like to inspire. She will inspire by flipping any number of her scenes, turning them down, which currently she only needs to turn down 1. Something important to note is that you can turn down tapped or untapped scene cards. It doesn't matter if they are tapped for you to be able to use them to inspire. So by turning one of her scenes down, she will increase her inspiration for this contact alone to 7. And that will mean that she has a higher inspiration value than Spike. If your character has a higher inspiration value than your opponent's character when it comes to contact, then the opponent's character will be retired, moved to the retirement area. If both characters have the same inspiration value, for example, if Rarity had not inspired and was still 6, they would both be removed and sent to their owners' retirement areas. And if Spike had a higher one than Rarity for some reason, then Rarity would be retired. That is how contact works in a nutshell, but that was showing with Spike, who could not be inspired. But let's change the example and have this 5 inspiration Twilight Sparkle versing Rarity. Now, when it comes to this, if we were to contact, Twilight would be given the option to inspire. And Twilight could inspire, such as by turning down 3 of her scenes with the Inspo Boost ability that can inspire Twilight Sparkle. That would increase her inspiration from 5 all the way up to 8. Then Rarity may choose to inspire by turning down 2 of her scenes, increasing her inspiration to 8, so they would be tied. Now you may have noticed that Twilight still had 1 turned up scene that she could use to have inspired, but you're not allowed to go back and inspire again. the person whose turn it is inspires all that they would like to, the person who is defending inspires all that they would like to, and that is it. You then go on to contact and resolve from there. There's no going back to inspire again. So that is how that works. Now, that was ignoring that there was an item there, but if Twilight was adorned with an item and Rarity won the contact and Twilight would be knocked out, or if they tied, the item goes with her to the retirement area. But now what happens if a character lands a direct hit, which is the last of the possible options that we have for this example? If a character scores a direct hit in the contact phase, then you get to, and are forced to, do one of two things. So it's mandatory for you to do one of these two things, and the options that you have available is to either promote your story or intervene the plan. So what these two are: intervening the plan, which I'll explain to begin with because you kind of need to do that before promoting your story. Intervening the plan takes the plan card that is on the lowest, so this is stage 1. They take the plan card that is on the lowest story stage and they remove it and reveal it. If it has a pre-plan ability, such as this Trixie, the ability will trigger, be sent to the retirement area, and do whatever it said to do. If the card did not have a pre-plan ability, it will be moved to the player's hand instead. So that was me removing 2, but just to show you the different examples of whether there was a pre-plan or not a pre-plan. Now, if you score a direct hit, the other option is to promote your story. The reason that you would generally need to intervene the plan first is that you're only allowed to promote your main character to a story stage, such as stage 1 on our field, if that corresponding numbered story stage, such as stage 1, does not have a plan card on it on the opponent's field. So you have to knock out your opponent's plan cards to be allowed to progress through your story stages. So to be able to progress to stage 4 and win the game, you have to knock out all 4 of your opponent's plan cards and then score 4 direct hits that are promoting you. Now you can, let's take Opal away for a second and pretend that we are going to score 2 hits. Here we go. So this is a new example board for us. If this was the board and we were moving to contact, nothing happens here. The opponent does not score a direct hit on us because it is our turn. We just ignore that line. In the next line, we score a direct hit and we can choose to either progress our story or intervene their plan. Seeing as we are on story stage 1 and would need to move to story stage 2, but their story stage 2 is covered, we're going to intervene the plan. And it is removed and revealed, has no pre-plan, goes to their hand. Now we score another direct hit, and here we have options. We could progress to stage 2, because their stage 2 does not have a plan card on it. Or we could intervene the plan again. You do not have to progress just because there is a stage to be progressed to if you don't want to, or you don't have to take a plan card just because there's a plan card to be taken. As long as there is the ability to, it's your choice. And why would you possibly not want to progress to a story? Well, that comes down to the story card's abilities. Because when you are promoting your character to a story stage, you get the story stage's ability, such as when promoted to this stage, draw a card. I apologize for the shaking. I'm currently trying to hold the camera one-handed. So that is the full breadth of different contact variables that you might find within the game of My Little Pony. I'm going to pause this and return to my original camera setup position. Okay, so Now you know how the contact phase works, how inspiring works, and what you can do when you score a direct hit. What else is left? Well, the end phase. The end phase is just the end of your turn, which occurs after the contact phase. Now, a note with the contact phase is that you skip it on the first turn of both players. It's actually a pretty important note and something I probably should have said at the start of the phase description. I apologize. On the backs of the rule sheets, it says you skip it for the first 2 turns of the game. What they mean by that is the first player's first turn and the second player's first turn, which are the first 2 turns of the game. So each player skips contact on their first turn, gives you some time to build up a bit of a board, and then you can start to get into the actual fighting of it. There's no fighting in this game, though. It's contact. They're solving friendship problems through inspiration and figuring it all out. So that's the one stipulation with the contact phase that is important to mention. Skipped on each player's first turn. Then we go to the end phase, and during this phase, you have any abilities that last until the end of the turn run out. So if you had an ability that gave Twilight Sparkle +2 inspiration until end of turn, that inspiration bonus ends here. And you discard down to your maximum hand size, which in this game is a whopping 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and here's an 11th. So if you had 11 or more cards in your hand at the end of your turn, you would pick one that you were not interested in keeping and send it to the retirement area, so you had 10 at the end of your own turn. If it becomes your opponent's turn and an ability triggers which allows you to draw 2 cards, you don't have to discard at the end of their turn. It's only at the end of yours where you're concerned with having no more than 10 cards in your hand. And you keep passing turns back and forth until someone has won the game. And that's basically everything, unless you want to go over what card rarities exist, which we can do quickly. So, here we go. The card rarities are Emerald Rare, which is the emerald green crystal down the bottom, exclusively found on your scene cards. Sapphire Rare, which can be found on event and item cards. And it's that sapphire blue crystal down the bottom. And then the various rarities of main deck character cards, different to main character cards. Those rarities are from least to most. Common, the black crystal. Uncommon, the beigey brown crystal. Silver Rare, which is the silver crystal. Gold Rare, which is the golden crystal. And Colorful Rare, which is the rainbow colorful crystal. That is the highest rarity of main deck character, not accounting for if you got an alt art of it. And then you've got, lastly, Ruby Rares, which are your main deck, are your main character cards. And you can get alt arts of various ones of these, such as, alt art scene cards, which are generally full color variants of said scenes. Alt art Ruby Rares, which I don't have one on hand, but are alternate artworks of those characters and are extremely rare. The rarest card of the game, in fact. Alt art Colorful Rares, which are, again, they're all alt arts. I don't need to go too much into that in a rules of play video, I believe. That does cover everything. You will now know enough to be able to set up and shuffle up and play. There are no other restrictions when it comes to deck building, so don't think that I missed anything when it comes to the color of a card and what deck it can be included in, such as purple cards versus blue cards. That's all just an aesthetic choice. The color doesn't actually have any bearing on the resources you generate. Any card can go in any deck. You can play every single character in the one deck if you want to, and can physically fit it within the restriction of 50 cards in your deck. So you don't have to worry about card colors, main characters matching the majority of the characters in your deck. None of that matters. You can build a wonderfully chaotic deck if you would like to, which can even include Discord as of the latest set. And if you'd like to see some of the cards that came out in Discord, then you can check my unboxing video for that and see gameplay videos and soon to be more useful beginner guides and resources as I get to film them and add them to the channel. So I hope this was a good in-depth guide for you all. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe and stay tuned for even more to help you along in your journey in learning and growing and increasing your skill in this game. I hope to see you in the next one, and I will catch you all then. Bye for now.